night and day. Howdy guys, I'm AutoEdits Jason, and as you can see, we got the Squarebody Chevy stuffed back into the garage today. I am so loving the looks of this thing with the new wheels and tires that I've been driving it all the time now. And so today, to make that experience better, we're gonna do some ride improvement stuff. Now the first thing we're gonna do is a little experimental. We're gonna take a few leaf springs out of this. This is a C20, a 3/4 ton truck with the heavy duty camper special springs. So it rides absolutely miserable when it's unloaded like this. And since it spends 95% of its time driving around just like this without 1,000 pounds in the bed, I'm gonna take a few leaves out of the stock leaf spring packs on here and see if we can soften that up a little bit. Now you may be wondering, well, how are you gonna tow or haul heavy loads later? Well, I put this airlift system on my Dodge Ram several years ago and was over the moon with the performance of that thing. You get absolutely great ride quality for everyday use, and then you just hit a button and you can just pump up the airbags. The technology is such now that there's no reason to suffer this thing. I mean, this thing is an absolute kidney beater the way it is right now. It's miserable. So that's the one experimental thing. Plus, we're gonna do some tried and true stuff here. I got some Belltech Street Performance shocks that we're gonna put on there. My really quick overview on these things, I got introduced to these when I put a set on my buddy Joe's Jeep several years ago. I loved the valve philosophy, the way they felt, everything, and those had adjustability. These didn't, but I liked them so much that I ended up buying pretty much this exact set for my Tahoe, and then drove the crud out of that Tahoe with these things, and it was fantastic. So it was a no-brainer when I was getting shocks to order up a set of shocks for this thing. Now, the shocks that are on here are just worn out. They were put on in the 90s, so they're just past their service life. So this is a no-brainer to improve that. And then of course, since we're gonna have the leaf springs off, I'm gonna go ahead and put the energy suspension urethane bushings in there. Hope that I ordered the right front eyelet. And then since we're gonna take a few leaves out of the leaf pack, the stance of the truck is exactly right now. So to adjust for the height that I might lose by taking those off, I ordered a couple of 1.5" lift blocks that we will probably need. So that's where it's gonna get a little bit of seat of the pants. We're gonna have to see how we go. But for now, let me show you what I'm talking about, how stiff this thing rides. You know, I yanked the tailgate off of this thing just to give us a little bit of working space, but I weigh 165 pounds. Watch when I get up here and jump around on this thing just to give you an idea of the flex of this thing, and there's just really not much. So where that stiff ride really translates to you as the driver of this thing is when you get locked in here. In the family, we've just always called these the guillotine seat belts, because as you bounce, it tightens and locks and tightens and locks the more you hit bumps with that thing, and it just feels like it's cutting you in two. It just cinches you down until you just finally have to either pee your pants or you release the seatbelt and reset the thing. So that's what I'm trying to avoid, and just make this a little bit nicer. Let me know in the comments if you have an old square body experience with the old GM style seatbelts that just slowly clamp down on you. I think that was a 70s thing. They just didn't have that release in there. But yeah, so we'll try to make this a little bit nicer. So first up, I put wheel chocks on the front tire. We'll jack the thing up and get it supported on the axle for now. Yank the wheels off, and then from there, we'll need to droop the axle. So from there, we'll put jack stands underneath the frame rails and droop the axle out to start our disassembly. Then it's a quick wrestling match to remove the U-bolts and free the upper spring plates. Yeah, I'm probably gonna paint those. Now jump to the rear spring hanger and loosen up the bolts back there. I needed a bit of pry bar persuasion to get that thing to come out, but it did. And for the front spring bolt, you'll have to get a little creative. I used a medium-sized crescent wrench in the pocket and buzzed that sucker right out. All right, spring is completely free. It's a lot heavier than I even thought. Let's get this out of here safely. Oh, don't you hate when you do that? Good thing I got me right on the toughest part of my body, right on the back of my dome. All right, let's get this thing out and analyze. Now that the springs are out of this thing, I'm gonna go ahead and take this one apart. And I got my lift block here so you can see, and I'm looking at which springs I'm gonna target to pull out of here. So I think I'm gonna pull these two bottom ones out, keep the one that has the collar on it, and the one right above that. So we're gonna take 3 springs, 3 leaves out of here, and then put our lift block here at the bottom. It definitely has to be up a little bit, can't be saggy. We don't want any saggy stuff. And definitely when I get the airbags, I'll be able to manipulate that, but the goal is to get it to ride perfect without the airbags and only need those when you're hauling a heavy load. I used a couple of C-clamps to hold things together while I took out the center locating pin. Once the springs are released, the cross bolts can come out of the collars, and I remove the springs from the pack that I don't think we'll need. Pressing out the original GM bushings turned out to be the trickiest part of this whole shindig. I used my Harbor Freight press and improvised with miscellaneous sockets and parts from a ball joint service kit to get all of the metal sleeves out from each eyelet. And now, since I am neck deep into this project, I decided to go ahead and wire brush, kind of just knock some of the crud off of these things, and I'm going to spray some of this Seymour technical spray. It's a rust converter, so basically it'll just, any surface rust, it'll just turn that back into a primer surface. But for now, we're going to clean out the ends of these things. Wire brush is cleaning and just fogging some rust converter on there to just make it so it's not quite so bad. This stuff seriously kicks butt. So I'm pretty happy with the results. Single coat of the rust converter really looks amazing, and it felt good to just get a bunch of years off. Now it's great while you're doing that to make sure that your junk is still good. I checked for cracks. There are no cracks in this thing. All of the leaves look like they're in pretty good shape, and so it's worth putting back together. We'll get these all back in place here. I'm shocked that these tabs always break on these things, and I'm just shocked that they're all intact. Going back on. Now we'll start the reassembly, and that's just restacking these things. And we have our overload spring here that we're going to keep in place because we like that. And that definitely will come in handy, and we'll need that ride height. I'm really a little nervous that I might have taken one too many leaves out, but we're committed at this point. So we're going to go in and we'll just restack these things, line them up on the bolt. Yeah. These things you couldn't do this with those 3 extra leaves in there, so yikes. We'll tighten these things down. All right, let's get some bushings in here. So we'll get started with this swing arm here. We'll get these. Now you'll notice inside these bushings, there are a bunch of grooves right here, and that is where you want to make sure that you get fair amount of grease inside. Let's do the big side here. This would be the front eyelet, and on this truck, it's an important measurement. You have to know if you have the 1.5 or 1 3/4, and this, since it has the camper springs, has the 1 3/4 bushings here. Boom, we're ready to install. With the lift block in place on the axle perch, heave the leaf springs back where they're supposed to live. Starting at the front, get the bolt lined up, which might need a little persuasion. Then slide up under the rear and stuff the leaf spring shackle on the end, and get the upper and lower bolts where they belong. Remember, nothing gets tightened yet. Now for the U-bolts and the clamp here. Now I did drill a little hole because I was non-committal. You could just cut this right here, But since I'm not sure that I might be adding a leaf, I just cut it and we left that long just in case I need it. So we'll put our new U-bolts up in place. Last checks. Bolts are in, nuts are on the back, and so everything's captured, but nothing's tight at all right now. But right now I just want to see that this is in place and located perfectly. Now let's get the axle, lift the whole truck up and support it under the axle weight, and then we can start tightening and looking how we did. Well, I think I done messed up here. After bouncing on the bumper a little bit and letting this thing settle into its own weight, I think it's too low in the back. I just did a quick preliminary measurement and my gut told me that the back end was a little too low, and sure enough, it sits dead level right now like it is. I don't have the tailgate on. That's another 100 pounds. There's no spare tire. So that's not gonna work in the real world. That means the back end's gonna go down and it's completely useless as a truck. So, wow, the learning here is that 49-year-old springs are tired, and doing a refresh on this, I didn't realize that all the rust, that they were just so rusted and seized together that it would not only made it stiff, it just kept it at a certain ride height because they were just one big solid block. Now everything's moving and loosey-goosey. This thing is able to kind of flex, and it's not good. So I painted up two more springs. So the end result here is we're gonna have pulled one leaf out, still added the 1.5-inch lift blocks is my guess at this moment. Now the tricky part is gonna be, I don't wanna pull that whole leaf pack back out since those are the two bottom springs. I'm pretty sure that if I use my little airbag jack here and do a little creative up and down, we're gonna be able to get the U-bolts out of this thing, pull the pin out, add our two leaves to the bottom of this, carefully reassemble the U-bolts and the clamp back in place, and we should be able to do that as is right here. So that's the plan. And now we'll readjust our jack stands so that it is now supporting its own weight again, and see what we got. Now that the suspension is holding up the truck again, it's time to tighten everything in place. The U-bolts go to 120 foot-pounds and the leaf springs go to about 90. Finally, time for some shocks. Thank goodness. This is turning out to be actually a job. This is where it gets glorious. So get that just started and captured there, and here's a little trick. Since these are gas charged, as soon as we cut this little strap here, it'll go shing, and we'll try to catch it as it goes. That's always a fun game. Alrighty, ready? And here it comes. We're gonna get it. Ow, got the glove in there. We got it. That's always so much fun to me. I don't know why. Let's get that stuff down. Easiest part of the job so far. That rear suspension is feeling pretty good. Time to swap out the front shocks. You don't have to remove the tires for this job, but I will, so we can get this sweet view of the old stuff coming out, installing a new larger upper mounting bolt, and slapping in the Belltech Street Performance goodness. Now let's see what this thing looks like back on the ground and get ready for our test drive. So now that we have all of the shocks out of the thing and we're about ready for a test drive, I want to do a quick demonstration for you. I think the stance is pretty good. Check this out. If you talk to an engineer, now you and me call these shock absorbers. If you talk to an engineer, a suspension engineer, they call these dampers. That's a fancy way of putting what they actually do. They actually dampen the forces of the road or the tire against the spring in the suspension. And so what they do is they just keep it from bouncing. Have you ever seen a car on the highway where the wheels are going, yeah, that's a blown strut or shock or damper. So this thing right here, you can see how easily I can exert force against that. That just shows you that like I knew already, because the front of this thing porpoises all the time. You would hit a bump and it would just continue to bounce for a while after, and that's because of the fact that you can do that. And the Belltech stuff that we just put in here, I actually love the valving that they do right in their off-the-shelf shock, like the ones we put in. Those are the Street Performance ones. They just feel great to me. If you're in the market for shocks, give those guys a look. I'm just telling you, they're pretty good. We need to drive this thing. Out of the driveway, first test. Better. Better. I am so curious to see how we did back there. Oh, I know we got some speed bumps just down the block here. Let's go hit those. That'll be a good test. But first up, right away, you can tell the front shocks were pretty much wasted. It's nice to have the front end just stay underneath me is what the best way I could describe that. The front end just feels way more planted. So that was definitely needed. The back, come to think of it, what I don't feel is that jarring harshness, but it still feels stiff. So here's our first speed bump. Oh, night and day, night and day. I mean, this thing still feels like it could do work, and I'm glad about that, but there you go. That just feels, it used to get air. If I hit a speed bump aggressive like that, it would just like get air and then just, and then tighten the seatbelt down on me. And now you could actually see, this is just absolutely night and day. What the front would do is it would go over that speed bump and then continue to bounce for another 20, 30 feet here after this. And that is a good sign to you that your shocks are done. Your dampers are done. So we've done some good work. Let's get it out on the road and see how the back end here feels on the over the road stuff, because that's where I just wanted to make this thing way more comfortable. All right, let's go do the neighborhood loop. There's a couple of really gnarly manhole covers right here that really cause my kidneys problems in this truck. It's gonna be nice. All right, here we go. What manhole cover? Wow, okay. That's actually more dramatic than I thought. Again, the metaphor is it's taking the edge or the evil off of those bumps and just rides like this truck should, I think. Another fascinating thing to think about is that, so basically we took 1/4 inch leaf spring out and we added an 1.5 inch lift block, and we're at the same ride height. But I think we got it. So I got a usable truck that rides much more comfortable. This is very nice. If you can see, normal road bumps, very acceptable. Yeah, the over-the-road feel is noticeably different. The truck feels way more modern. You used to get behind the wheel of this and know you're driving basically something that felt like a covered wagon, rigid axles, and it would skip and bounce over stuff. But yeah, this is great. We've done good work here. That was a big dirty job though. I gotta say, that caught me by surprise. Take some more bumps on purpose. That's what I'm talking about. So there's a fun update on the old AutoEdits Squarebody. We did some leaf spring refresh, little mods back there. The thing is sitting really quite perfect. I think we did good. Still usable. Got airbags in the future when the loads get serious. Next up, we'll tackle some of the running stuff in here now that we've made it such a nice driver. Don't forget to check your shocks. If you notice some of that stuff, pay attention to that. Those are little fun, easy things. That was the easiest. Look at the leaf springs, what they do. That's a bigger job than I ever thought. but shocks are a fun, easy upgrade. Don't be afraid to get out on your vehicle and tackle that one on your own. That's a fun one. High reward, changes the driving dynamics. That's a good one. And thank you guys so much for watching. Please hit that like button for me. Let's tell that algorithm what's up. And until next time, you know the drill. Enjoy your drive.